Good morning and welcome to the Hensley Homestead YouTube channel. Today we are making a sourdough starter from scratch. No yeast involved, just sugar and, flour and water. There's nothing else, literally just flour and water. So I've got my jar with a clean lid, some distilled water there, or Berkey water, whatever you want to call it, some all-purpose flour, and I do throw in some rye flour for an extra kick. So now I am using a kitchen scale, as you can see. I think I bought this one on Amazon for like $5 to $7, somewhere around there. And this is just regular, organic, all-purpose flour. I think you got it at Kroger. I do typically put the water in first if I've already got discard in there, but where I don't have discard in there today, I'm starting it from scratch. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and add the flour first. Now I'm adding in some dark rye flour. We've already done 50 grams of the all-purpose, and now we're adding 10 grams of dark rye. The rye flour helps with sourdough because it attracts more yeast and ferments a lot faster. So the enzyme activity is a lot higher with the sourdough and rye flour, if that makes sense. So I do add a little boost there to get us going. And then I'm going to go in with our distilled water, which I like to keep anywhere from 80 to 100 degrees and match in grams. So again, we've done 50 grams of all-purpose flour, 10 grams of the rye flour, and now we're going to do 60 grams of my distilled water that is warm but not hot. Now, some people say that silver or stainless steel or anything like that can mess with your sourdough starter and the yeast properties. So I do use wood. I don't know exactly how accurate everything is about stainless steel or silver, whatever. But I do personally use wood. I just enjoy it more. So we're going to give it a good stir. Make sure we get the flour off the bottom and move it around. And then we're going to scrape our sides down. And scrape off the spatula, put our lid on, create a little bit of humidity in there. And there we are. That is day 1 of our sourdough starter. And we will be back for tomorrow. Quick little picture at the end on where we're at. I did not mark it or anything. This is the next day. It's done a little bit. It's not done much, but it's done a little bit. Got some bubbles in there. Yeah, so we were at the second line before, and we've risen 1 line on our jar. So here we are, again showing you where we're at. I want to say this was after I hit the bottom on the counter. And we're just going to dump it out. We're just going to use what's left on the jar after we tip it over to continue to build our starter. Yeah, so that's all we have left after. And I'm going to go ahead and put it on our scale and do the same thing we did yesterday. Amounts may change, but they will still line up with each other. And what I mean by that is we'll do, it'll either be like 60-60, 80-80, something like that on a water to flour ratio. So scraping our jar down. And now we are going to go in with our about 80-degree water, 80 to 100. So I'm doing 100 today. And I did find that temperature works best for me. And we're going to add $70 grams. That was an accident, but we'll still match it up. Give it a little stir. And stir it again. I will say your consistency should be kind of like a waffle batter. Some people say pancake batter, but I like mine a little bit thicker. It seems to work better for me, and I have a longer rise time, so I have more opportunities to hit it at its highest point. Now this is the next feeding. I do think I let it go a little while before I fed it. I want to say I missed a feeding. Could be wrong. I have 3 kids. It just, you never know. But we've got some hooch there on the top. Not a lot, but it's a thin layer. If you can see on the top, there's a little dark line. It's definitely more wet than I usually keep it. So we're just going to go discard that. I mentioned hooch. So hooch is a liquid that sits on top of your sourdough starter that's actually kind of like an alcohol. And you don't want it there. It basically says that your starter's hungry, needs some flour, needs some water, you need to get rid of some of it and take care of it. It's just your warning sign before things go bad. So here I am just adding our flour and our water. This is the last day I'm going to show you of me actually feeding and watering and discarding the sourdough starter. From here, I'm going to show you what my jar looks like on the rest of the days, and at the end, I'm going to go through my recipe that I used for my sourdough loaf. Alright guys, and this is when it gets fun. This is day 5. We're getting some good bubbles in there. It's definitely getting stronger. And again, I'm not showing you my feeding today. I'm just showing you what it's doing. And that is day 6. That is not at full rise, but it was doing really well too. Alright guys, this is day 7, and clearly it has doubled. It is very active, very bubbly, doing very good. So I decided that I was going to go ahead and do my sourdough loaf. Could I have waited longer? Sure. But I wanted to go ahead and do it and see how it turned out. I need to get practice at this loaf anyways. Making the bread is always what bothered me so much. Now, this sourdough loaf recipe is the starter recipe from Farmhouse on Boone. So this is not my recipe. So I'm not going to go through this recipe because it is not mine. I did not change it. I am doing exactly what it says to do. So if you need that recipe, go find her. Farmhouse on Boone, her blog, they do some really good sourdough stuff if you don't know about them. If you're doing sourdough and you don't know about them, you need to go over there. Now, the problem with this loaf of bread is I'm fairly certain I let my bread ferment for way too long. But that's okay. We live, we learn. And next time I'll be better. Still turned out good. Still turned out pretty. Just not exactly how I wanted it. I think people sometimes tend to forget that I am just in my 20s, early 20s, with 3 babies. I don't know everything about bread making or homesteading or homemaking. You guys are learning right there with me. And I'd like to think of it as us doing it together instead of me teaching or whatever. I'm just showing you what I'm doing, what might work for you, what might not work for you, or just might be pleasant to the eye. So that's why I do what I do. Just to have a community. So thank you for being that for me. Now I'm doing 3 stretch and folds, 30 minutes apart. And again, this is Farmhouse on Boone's recipe. I'm not taking any, I want to say responsibility, but that's not really what I'm going for. Credit. I'm not taking any credit. This is a typical thing to do in a non-knead recipe. This is a no-knead recipe, so we are stretching and folding it over pretty pitifully, might I add. I'm not stretching it very well. It was very sticky, but again, I was just rolling with it. I'd never done it before, so. The stretch and folds sound are exactly what they sound like. You stretch the dough up and fold over and then turn your bowl. So if you didn't know how to stretch and fold, now you do. Now this next part is kind of where I knew I had gone wrong. This was after the first rise. It's kind of soupy, not very bubbly, not very set the way I like for my dough to be set. Which I will say this was an easier stretch and fold, but definitely not doubled. Alright guys, so clearly I have no idea what I'm doing. So I did not time this correctly. This is like 2 a.m. I got up and got the kids milk and saw that my sourdough starter was like at peak rise. So here I am getting the very soupy dough onto a floured surface. And I'm basically just going to shape it, but I didn't shape it correctly. So, I mean, again, I said I'm learning, I'm figuring it out, but we will we'll learn together. Hopefully I'll post another sourdough video. This is obviously not my strong suit. I'm just now learning this. I have been in yeast breads for a little while, but you don't typically shape yeast breads and things like that. You're not worried about air bubbles. They're gonna happen. But yeah, just bear with me. And I do not have a banneton yet, so I'm just using a towel covered bowl. I probably should have used a linen rather than a dishwash or a dish towel, because you'll see here in a minute that it does stick. But this is after it's sat from 2 a.m. to like 2 p.m., so another 12 hours in the fridge for that cold fermentation, or cold retard, I think is what they call it. But here we are right before baking. I've already preheated my Dutch oven, and I'm just going to get this scored and then thrown in the oven. And clearly it does take me a little bit to get this towel off. It's stuck pretty good. As I did mention, we're going to score and then throw it in the oven. I don't show you all this on camera, but I do stick ice cubes behind the parchment paper on my cast iron to create steam in the oven. That works for my yeast, crusty bread, and stuff like that. So that is what I do. I do highly recommend it if you don't do that with your breads. And while we're waiting here, I did just want to mention that I appreciate each and every one of you and the support that you're giving this channel. I hope that this all reaches something big one day, and maybe I can teach people about what I've learned, which isn't much yet, but I'm getting there. I'm learning more every day on this homestead. So don't think that your likes, comments, views don't count, because they do, and we appreciate every single one of them. So God bless you all, and we're almost done with this bread, so keep following for the end shot. And this is our finished product. It did really turn out okay. It just wasn't perfect, and I like to be a little bit of a perfectionist with my food. But I'll see y'all later.